The auction house smelled of antiseptic and despair. Kira stood on the platform, number 7892, branded into the skin behind her ear, watching the Veth'kai buyers examine the merchandise with the same clinical detachment one might show livestock. "This one," the female Veth'kai said, her iridescent scales catching the harsh light. "Damaged reproductive system. Unsuitable for breeding programs." She turned to her companion, a male whose crest lay flat against his skull in what Kira had learned to recognize as disinterest. "Why are we even looking at defectives, Soren?" Soren didn't answer. He was studying Kira with an expression she couldn't read. Not hunger, not cruelty, something else entirely. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, the inner pair first, then the outer. "I need someone for the children," he said finally. "Not for me." The female, his sister, Kira would later learn, made a sound of disgust. "You could afford a premium breeder. Father left you. I know what father left me." His voice carried an edge that silenced her. "I'll take this one." Kira didn't flinch when the ownership chip was injected into her spine. She'd stopped flinching 3 years ago when Earth fell. What was one more violation in a lifetime of them? The transport to his estate took 4 hours. Soren didn't speak, didn't explain, didn't touch her. He sat across from her in the private compartment, reading something on a datapad while she catalogued escape routes she knew she'd never use. The estate was vast, a sprawling complex of crystalline structures that hummed with energy she could feel in her teeth. And waiting at the entrance were 2 small figures, their scales not yet hardened, their crests soft and translucent. "These are my sister's children," Soren said, the first words he'd spoken since the auction. "She died in the purges. Her mate followed the old ways and—" He stopped. "They need someone. I am not equipped." The smaller one, barely reaching Kira's hip, looked up at her with eyes that held too much knowledge for such a young face. "Are you going to hurt us?" Kira knelt, ignoring the pain in her knees, ignoring the chip burning in her spine, ignoring everything except this child who had clearly learned to ask that question. "No. Promise? I promise." Soren watched this exchange with those unreadable 4 eyes. When Kira stood, he said, "Your quarters are in the East Wing. You will have access to the children's areas and the gardens. The rest of the estate is restricted." A pause. "You will not be used for anything else. I'm not my father." He walked away before she could respond, leaving her with 2 orphans and a promise she wasn't sure she believed. 3 months passed before Kira understood that Soren was as much a prisoner as she was. She learned it in fragments, overheard conversations, the children's innocent revelations, the way servants looked at him with something between pity and contempt. His father had been a high arbiter, one of the architects of the human subjugation. When he died, Soren inherited not just wealth but expectation, a legacy of cruelty he was supposed to continue. He didn't. "Why doesn't Uncle Soren eat with us?" Mira, the younger child, asked one evening. She'd grown attached to Kira in the way of traumatized children, desperately, fearfully, testing boundaries constantly. "I don't know, little one. Mother said he was broken," Tal, the older one, offered. "She said the war broke something in him, and Father said that's why he was useless." Kira filed this away, adding it to her growing understanding of the household's dynamics. Soren appeared only for formal occasions, spent most of his time in the restricted sections, and treated her with a careful distance that felt almost like fear. The first crack came on a night when Mira's nightmares were particularly bad. Kira was walking her through the gardens, the only place the child found peace, when they encountered Soren sitting alone by the reflection pool. He looked diminished. His crest was flat, his scales dull, and he was holding something small in his clawed hands. "Uncle?" Mira's voice was hesitant. Soren startled, nearly dropping the object. A holographic image, Kira realized. A female Veth'kai, young, with scales the same shade as the children's. "You should be sleeping," he said, but there was no command in it. "Bad dreams." Mira moved closer, drawn by something Kira couldn't see. "Is that Mother?" A long silence. "Yes, I'm forgetting what she looked like." The child's voice cracked. "I try to remember, and I can't, and I hate it." Soren looked at Kira then, and for the first time, she saw something recognizable in those alien eyes. Helplessness. The same helplessness she'd felt watching Earth burn, watching everyone she loved reduced to numbers and cargo. "Would you like to see more images?" he asked his niece. "I have, many. Of her. Of your father. Before he became mean? Yes? Before." Kira watched them walk toward the main house, Mira's small hand reaching up to grip one of Soren's fingers. He held it like it might break, like he'd forgotten how to touch without causing pain. That night, she lay awake recalculating everything she thought she knew. The crisis came without warning, as crises do. Inspectors from the Arbiter Council arrived to assess Soren's compliance with cultural obligations. In practice, this meant verifying that he was using his human property appropriately, breeding them, working them, breaking them as his father had done. "You have one human registered," the lead inspector said, her tone dripping with disdain. "Female non-breeding stock, no work assignments logged, no discipline records." She looked at Soren like he was something rotting. "Your father would be ashamed. My father is dead. His legacy isn't. The council is concerned. There are rumors you've gone soft. That you treat the creature as," she struggled with the word, "a person." Kira stood in the corner where she'd been ordered to wait, invisible, silent, the way humans were supposed to be. But she watched. She saw Soren's crest rise for the first time since she'd known him. Saw his scales flush with color she didn't recognize. "What I do with my property is my concern, not when it reflects on the bloodline. Not when it encourages others to question the natural order." The inspector moved closer to Kira, examining her like a defective product. "She's healthy. Functional, despite the breeding limitation. There are other uses. The entertainment houses always need, no." The word cracked through the room like a physical force. Soren had moved between the inspector and Kira, his body blocking her from view. His claws were extended, something Kira had never seen. "She is mine. The children need her. I will not. You will do as the council requires, or you will lose everything. The estate, the children, your standing." The inspector smiled, showing teeth. "You have one cycle to demonstrate compliance. Use the human properly, or we will take her and show you how it's done." After they left, Soren didn't move for a long time. When he finally turned, Kira saw something she never expected to see on a Veth'kai face. "Shame." "I'm sorry," he said. "I thought if I kept quiet, kept you hidden, they would forget. I was naive. What happens now? I don't know." He looked at his claws, still extended, like he didn't recognize them. I don't know how to be what they want. What my father was. I watched him, growing up. Watched what he did to humans, to my mother, to anyone weaker. I swore I would never." His voice broke, but I also never fought it. I just hid. Let the system continue while I looked away. Kira should have felt satisfaction. Here was her captor, her owner, finally confronting his complicity. But all she felt was tired. "You bought me," she said. "You all own me. That's not nothing. I know. You could have freed me. There are ways. The underground and the children, they would have been taken, given to someone who would raise them as my father raised me. I told myself I was protecting them. Protecting you even. But I was just He made a sound she'd never heard from a Veth'kai. It took her a moment to recognize it as a sob. I was just a coward. Kira stood there in the room where she was property, looking at the alien who owned her, and felt something shift. Not forgiveness. That would take years, if it ever came. But recognition. Understanding. What do you want to do? She asked. Not what's safe. Not what's expected. What do you actually want? He looked at her, all four eyes wet with tears she didn't know his species could produce. I want to burn it all down. The council. The system. Everything my father built. A pause. But I'm not brave enough. Maybe you don't have to be. Not alone. The underground had been watching Soren for years, waiting to see which way he would fall. When Kira made contact through the garden's maintenance systems, a network the resistance had long ago infiltrated, they were skeptical but willing to listen. He's still an owner, the cell leader said through the encrypted channel. Still part of the system. He's a resource, Kira replied. His father's files, the estate's location, the council's inspection schedules. He has access we've never had, and you trust him? Kira considered the question carefully. I trust that he hates what he is. That's enough to start. The operation took 6 months to plan. Soren provided intelligence, opened doors, looked the other way when humans moved through his estate to freedom. The children were told nothing. They were too young, too likely to accidentally reveal something. But they sensed the change in the household, the tension, the hope. On the night of the uprising, when resistance cells across the continent moved simultaneously against council facilities, Soren did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He fought. Not well. He'd never been trained for combat, had spent his life avoiding conflict, but he stood beside humans he'd been taught to see as animals and fired on his own people. When it was over, when the local council headquarters was burning, and the first human broadcasts were going out across the planet, he sat in the ruins with blood on his scales that might have been his own. Kira found him there, hours later. The children are safe, she said. The evacuation route worked. He nodded, not looking up. Soren. He flinched at his name. She'd never used it before, always sir or nothing at all, the way property addressed owners. You're free, he said. The chip deactivation codes went out with the broadcast. You're free, and you should go. Find other humans. Build something. Forget this place. Is that what you want? What I want doesn't matter. I was part of the system. I benefited from it, even when I hated it. There's no redemption for that. Kira sat down beside him, close enough to touch but not touching. You're right. There isn't. Not really. You can't undo what was done, to me, to millions of others. You can't give back the years, the dignity, the lives. Then why are you still here? Because the children need someone. And because... She paused, searching for words that didn't exist in either of their languages. Because I spent 3 years learning to see you. Not as an owner. Not as an enemy. As a person who is also trapped in a different kind of cage. That doesn't make what happened okay. It doesn't make us equal. But it makes us something. What? I don't know yet. Maybe we figure it out. Maybe we don't. But I'm not leaving those children, and you're not capable of raising them alone, and the world is about to change in ways neither of us can predict. She finally looked at him. So I'm staying. Not because I forgive you. Not because I love you. Because it's the choice I'm making, freely, for the first time since Earth fell. Soren was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. I don't deserve that. No, you don't. But that's not really the point, is it? The sun was rising over the burning city, painting the sky in colors that looked almost like hope. Somewhere in the distance, human voices were singing, a song Kira remembered from childhood, from before everything ended and began again. She didn't join in. It wasn't her song anymore, not quite. She'd become something else in the years of captivity, something that didn't fit neatly into categories of victim or survivor, human or other. But she was still here, still choosing. And maybe that was enough. Soren's hand moved hesitantly toward hers. He stopped before making contact, waiting. Kira looked at that hand, clawed, scaled, belonging to a species that had enslaved her people, and made another choice. She didn't take it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she didn't move away. And in the space between them, something new began to grow. Not love, not forgiveness, not redemption. Something harder to name and harder to kill. Something that might, given enough time and enough choices, become something worth having. Or might not. The future, for the first time in years, was genuinely uncertain. And an uncertainty, Kira realized, tasted a lot like freedom.